In the ancient texts, written in languages long forgotten, preserved in libraries that exist between worlds, there is a prophecy so old that its origins are lost to time itself. A prophecy that speaks not of the future, but of a return, of something that was always meant to come back, of a power that cannot be permanently suppressed, of a truth that refuses to remain buried. This is the prophecy of the Dragon Queen, and it was written not in ink or stone, but in the very fabric of creation itself, encoded in the patterns of the stars, woven into the structure of human consciousness, waiting for the moment when humanity would be ready to remember what it had forgotten. The story of this prophecy begins in a place that exists outside of ordinary time, in a dimension of consciousness that the ancients called the Akashic records, the eternal library where all knowledge, all history, all possibility is stored. In this place, there is a being of immense power and ancient wisdom, a consciousness so vast that it encompasses entire universes, yet so intimate that it knows every thought, every feeling, every secret desire of every being that has ever existed. This being is not a god in the traditional sense, but rather the source from which all gods emerge, the ground of being itself, the consciousness that dreams reality into existence. And in this being's awareness, there is a knowing that has always existed, that will always exist, that transcends the boundaries of time and causality. This knowing is the prophecy of the Dragon Queen's return. It is not a prediction of something that might happen, but a recognition of something that must happen, something that is written into the very nature of existence itself, something that cannot be prevented or delayed, only delayed or hastened, depending on the choices that conscious beings make. The prophecy speaks of a time when the feminine divine, in all of its power and complexity, would be driven underground, suppressed, demonized, and hidden away. It speaks of a long night of the soul, a period of thousands of years during which the sacred feminine would be exiled from the centers of power, from the institutions of religion and governance, from the consciousness of humanity itself. It speaks of suffering and struggle, of women bearing the weight of oppression, of the earth itself crying out in pain as it was violated and exploited, of the sacred knowledge being twisted and corrupted to serve the purposes of domination and control. But the prophecy also speaks of something else. It speaks of an awakening. It speaks of a time when the suppressed feminine power would begin to stir, to rise, to demand recognition and restoration. It speaks of signs and portents that would herald this awakening, of changes in the earth and in human consciousness that would signal the beginning of the end of the old order. And most importantly, it speaks of the Dragon Queen herself, not as a distant mythological figure, but as a living principle of consciousness, a force that is eternally present, eternally calling humanity to remember its true nature. There was a scholar once, a man named Marcus, who dedicated his entire life to the study of ancient prophecies and forgotten wisdom traditions. He was not a believer in the conventional sense, not someone who accepted religious dogma without question. Rather, he was a seeker of truth, someone who was willing to follow evidence wherever it led, even if it led him into territories that challenged his assumptions and threatened his worldview. He had spent decades studying the texts of various cultures, comparing prophecies, looking for patterns, searching for the underlying truth that connected all of these different traditions. It was in a hidden archive in Istanbul, in a room that had been sealed for centuries, that Marcus discovered something that would change the course of his life. It was a manuscript, written in a language that was a mixture of several ancient tongues. A language that seemed designed to be understood only by those who possessed a certain level of spiritual development and esoteric knowledge. The manuscript was titled simply, "The Return of the Dragon Queen was Foretold," and it contained a prophecy so comprehensive, so detailed, and so aligned with the events of the modern world that Marcus felt as though he had been struck by lightning. The manuscript began with a question: Do you know what was written before the world was made? Do you know what was spoken in the silence before sound existed? Do you know the prophecy that was encoded into the very structure of creation, the prophecy that cannot be prevented, only fulfilled? And then it proceeded to lay out, in symbolic and poetic language, a detailed account of the Dragon Queen's exile and her inevitable return. According to the manuscript, the Dragon Queen was not a single individual, but a principle of consciousness, a frequency of energy that animated all of creation. She was the creative force itself, the power that brought worlds into being, the consciousness that dreamed reality into existence. In her fullness, she was both masculine and feminine, both creative and destructive, both light and dark. She was the totality of existence, the ground of being, the source from which all things emerged. But at a certain point in human history, a great separation occurred. The masculine principle began to assert dominance over the feminine principle. The rational mind began to claim supremacy over the intuitive wisdom. The external world of material accumulation began to be valued more highly than the internal world of spiritual development. And as this separation deepened, the feminine divine was increasingly suppressed, hidden, demonized, and driven underground. The manuscript explained that this separation was not accidental, but was part of a cosmic drama, a necessary stage in the evolution of human consciousness. It was a period of contraction, of forgetting, of descent into limitation and separation. But like all cycles, this period of contraction was destined to be followed by a period of expansion, of remembering, of ascent into wholeness and integration. And the return of the Dragon Queen was the symbol and the catalyst for this return to wholeness. Marcus read the manuscript late into the night, his heart pounding, his mind racing with the implications of what he was reading. The text spoke of specific signs that would herald the Dragon Queen's return. It spoke of the earth itself beginning to rebel against the exploitation and violation it had suffered. It spoke of women rising in unprecedented numbers to claim their power and their voice. It spoke of the collapse of institutions built on lies and the emergence of new forms of community based on truth and equality. It spoke of a great awakening of consciousness, a shift in human perception that would allow people to see reality as it truly was, rather than as they had been conditioned to believe it was. And as Marcus read, he realized with a shock that all of these signs were manifesting in the world right now, in his own time. The climate crisis, the rise of the feminine in every sector of society, the questioning of traditional authority, the emergence of new spiritual movements that honored the sacred feminine, the collapse of institutions that had been built on patriarchal power. All of these were the signs spoken of in the ancient prophecy. He spent the next several years studying this manuscript, comparing it with other ancient texts, traveling to sacred sites around the world, interviewing spiritual teachers and indigenous elders who still carried fragments of the ancient knowledge. And everywhere he went, he found confirmation of what the manuscript had revealed. The prophecy of the Dragon Queen's return was not unique to one tradition, but was woven through the spiritual wisdom of virtually every culture on earth. In the Hindu traditions, it was spoken of as the return of Kali, the fierce mother, the destroyer and creator, the one who dances on the corpse of the old order to bring forth the new. In the Celtic traditions, it was the return of the Morrigan, the warrior goddess, the one who flew over the battlefields of transformation. In the African traditions, it was the return of Oshun and Yemaya, the feminine powers of the rivers and the seas, the ones who could not be contained or controlled. In the indigenous traditions of the Americas, it was the return of White Buffalo Woman, the sacred feminine who brings the gifts of spiritual knowledge and transformation. And in the Christian tradition, which had most thoroughly suppressed the feminine divine, there were hints and fragments of this prophecy as well. In the figure of Mary Magdalene, the woman who was slandered and erased from history, but who was actually the closest disciple of Christ, the keeper of his deepest teachings. In the figure of Sophia, the divine wisdom that appeared in the Gnostic texts, the feminine aspect of God that had been driven underground by the patriarchal church. In the figure of the bride of Christ, the feminine principle that would eventually be reunited with the masculine principle in a sacred union that would transform all of creation. If you want a practical step-by-step explanation of the path of knowledge we're exploring here today, I've created a complete guide to help you apply it in your own life. You'll find the link in the description. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. As Marcus delved deeper into his research, he began to experience phenomena that could not be explained by conventional science or rational thought. He began to have dreams in which he was visited by a presence of overwhelming power and beauty, a feminine presence that seemed to contain within itself all of the wisdom and all of the compassion of the universe. In these dreams, he was shown visions of the Dragon Queen in her full glory, not as a demon or a monster, but as the most beautiful and most terrible thing he had ever witnessed. A consciousness so vast and so powerful that it made the mountains seem like grains of sand. And in these dreams, the Dragon Queen spoke to him. She told him that the prophecy was not just about the future, but about the present moment, about the eternal now in which all of creation existed. She told him that her return was not something that would happen at some distant point in time, but was happening right now, in every moment, in every breath, in every awakening of consciousness. She told him that he had been chosen, not because he was special or superior, but because he was willing to see, willing to listen, willing to carry the message forward into the world. The prophecy was written before time began, the Dragon Queen said to him in one of these visions. It was written in the language of symbols and archetypes, in the patterns that underlie all of creation. And it was written not to predict the future, but to call forth the future, to invite those who were ready to participate in the great work of transformation that is unfolding. You have been given the knowledge. Now you must choose what you will do with it. Will you keep it hidden, as so many have done before you? Or will you speak it, knowing that speaking it will bring you both blessing and curse, both love and opposition? Marcus emerged from these visions transformed. He understood that he could not remain a passive scholar, studying the prophecy from a distance. He had to become an active participant in the unfolding of the prophecy itself. He had to use his knowledge, his platform, his voice to help awaken others to the truth that was being revealed. He began to write. He wrote books that were published under his own name and under various pseudonyms. He created videos and podcasts that reached thousands of people. He gave lectures at universities and spiritual centers, always carefully framing his message in language that would resonate with his audience, always presenting evidence and arguments that could withstand rational scrutiny, but always pointing toward the deeper truth that lay beneath the surface. And as he did this work, he began to encounter others who were doing similar work, other carriers of the message, other voices crying out in the wilderness to awaken those who were ready to hear. He found that there was a global network of seekers and teachers and activists who, without necessarily knowing about the ancient prophecy, were working to bring about the very transformation that the prophecy spoke of. They were working to heal the earth, to empower women, to challenge oppressive systems, to awaken consciousness, to restore the balance between the masculine and feminine principles. He realized that the return of the Dragon Queen was not dependent on any single individual or any single movement. It was a process that was unfolding across the entire planet in thousands of different ways, through millions of different people. It was a process that could not be stopped because it was not imposed from outside, but was arising from within the consciousness of humanity itself, from the deep knowing that something had to change, that the old order could not continue, that a new way of being had to be born. But Marcus also understood that this process of transformation was not automatic or inevitable. It depended on the choices that people made, on whether they chose to resist the awakening or to embrace it, on whether they chose to cling to the old ways or to open themselves to the new possibilities that were emerging. The prophecy spoke of the Dragon Queen's return, but it did not speak of when or how this return would be completed. It only spoke of the inevitability of the process, the certainty that the feminine divine could not remain suppressed forever, the knowledge that eventually the balance would be restored. In his final years, Marcus withdrew from public life. He knew that his time was coming to an end, that his role in carrying the message was nearing completion. He spent his days in meditation and contemplation, in communion with the presence that had guided him throughout his life. And he prepared a final manuscript, a summary of everything he had learned, a distillation of the prophecy in language that would be accessible to ordinary people, a gift to leave behind for those who would come after him. In this final manuscript he wrote, "The prophecy of the Dragon Queen's return is not a prophecy of doom, though it may appear so to those who are attached to the old order. It is a prophecy of transformation, of awakening, of the return to wholeness. The Dragon Queen does not come to destroy the world, but to destroy the illusions that have imprisoned the world. She comes to awaken us from the long sleep of separation and forgetfulness. She comes to restore the balance, to heal the wound that was created when the feminine divine was driven underground. And the return of the Dragon Queen is not something that will happen to us, as if we are passive observers of a cosmic drama. It is something that will happen through us, through our choices, through our willingness to awaken, through our commitment to truth and justice and the honoring of all life. Each of us is a cell in the body of the Dragon Queen. Each of us is a note in the symphony of her return. Each of us has a role to play in the great transformation that is unfolding. The prophecy was written before the world was made. It is being fulfilled in every moment. And it will continue to unfold until the balance is restored, until the masculine and feminine principles are reunited in sacred union, until the earth is healed, until humanity awakens to its true nature as a conscious participant in the creation of reality itself. When Marcus died, his final manuscript was found among his possessions. It was published, and it reached far more people than any of his previous works. It became a touchstone for the growing movement of those who were working to bring about the transformation that the prophecy spoke of. And though Marcus himself was gone, his work lived on, his voice continued to echo, his message continued to awaken those who were ready to hear. In our own time, we are living in the midst of the prophecy's fulfillment. We are witnessing the signs that were spoken of in the ancient texts. We are seeing the earth rising up to protect herself. We are seeing women claiming their power and their voice. We are seeing the collapse of institutions built on lies and the emergence of new forms of community based on truth. We are seeing an awakening of consciousness that is spreading across the planet like wildfire. And we are being called to participate in this awakening, to become conscious co-creators of the new world that is being born. The Dragon Queen is not coming to save us. She is coming to awaken us, to call us to our own power, to invite us to take responsibility for the creation of the future. She is coming to restore the balance, to heal the wound, to bring us back home to wholeness. The prophecy was written before time began. It is being fulfilled now. And the question that is being posed to each of us is this: Will we resist the awakening, clinging to the old ways even as they crumble around us? Or will we open ourselves to the transformation, becoming vessels for the creative power of the Dragon Queen, helping to birth the new world that is struggling to be born? The return of the Dragon Queen was foretold. And it is happening now, in this moment, in your consciousness, in your choices, in your willingness to awaken and to serve the great work of transformation. The prophecy is being fulfilled, and you are not a spectator. You are a participant. You are a carrier of the message. You are a voice for the awakening. You are a cell in the body of the Dragon Queen, and your role in her return is essential, is necessary, is sacred. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.